Sort out the camera angle. That's lovely, jubbly. Right, so welcome back everyone to the channel. Thanks very much for joining me. And this is my preview for the FA Cup final, which is taking place at Wembley Stadium this Saturday, the 25th of May, between Manchester United and Manchester City. Needless to say, I hope everyone's well and having a great day. And I'm recording this on Thursday about 3:30. I hope everyone's well and you're looking forward to this big match. It's always nice to have a big rivals clashing in a final. It should make for even more drama, I believe. But let's see. Anyway, so let's get into it. So we're going to look at the Warren's Team Talk road to Wembley and all the stops along the road that we've had. And there's been a fair few of them, let me tell you. So it started off way back in August last year, on the 5th of August, when Leeds Town defeated Camberley Town by 1-0 in the extra preliminary round of the FA Cup. The next round, which was held on the 28th of August, they were drawn at home again to Deal Town in the preliminary round. They won that game by 4-2. And then in the first qualifying round on the 3rd of September, Leeds Town travelled to Kingstonian and they got soundly beaten by 4-1 by Kingstonian. Kingstonian then travelled to Carl Shorten Athletic in the second qualifying round, and Carl Shorten gave them a bit of a thumping, to be quite frank. Carl Shorten won that game by 4-0. So we then moved on to the third qualifying round on the 30th of September, and this is when Cray Valley Paper Mills entered my radar. And they played Carl Shorten Athletic away, and the game ended in a 3-3 draw. So that it necessitated a replay, which was held on the 3rd of October. Cray Valley Paper Mills won that game by 2-1 at home to Carl Shorten Athletic. And in the next round, in the fourth qualifying round, set up a massive tie for them against Enfield Town, a game that Cray Valley Paper Mills won quite convincingly in the end by 5-2 in front of a bumper crowd for them of 579 people. Then on the 5th of November, and this meant that they were qualified for the first round proper. And in that first round proper, they got drawn away to Charlton Athletic of EFL League One. Charlton Athletic, a massive club with a massive history. They used to regularly get crowds of in excess of 70,000 people back in the day, back in like the 40s and stuff like that. And if anyone hasn't been to the Valley, the site of the current ground is built on the site of the old Valley. And the last time I was there, you could still see the old terracing behind it, and it honestly, it is huge. It really is. Anyway, that game ended in a 1-1 draw. So again, there was a replay required. Cray Valley Paper Mills hosted Charlton Athletic at their ground, and there was an attendance of 1,500 people attended. And unfortunately, despite holding out for the first half and giving as good as they got in the second half, Charlton stepped on the accelerator, and Cray Valley with Paper Mills just couldn't cope with them, and Charlton ran out winners by 6-1. In the second round, Charlton travelled to EFL League Two side Gillingham, and Charlton won that game Gillingham won that game by 2-0. It then moved on to the third round. Gillingham got drawn at home to Sheffield United, and Sheffield United ran out comfortable 4-0 winners. So the fourth round came along, and in that fourth round, Sheffield United were drawn at home to Brighton and HoveAlbion, and Sheffield United lost that game by 5-2. And then in the fifth round, Brighton then travelled up to Wolverhampton Wanderers. Wolves won that game by 1-0. And then in the sixth round, Wolves were handed a home tie against Midlands rivals Coventry City, a game which they lost by 3-2. A very eventful and dramatic game because a lot of goals came right near the end of the match. And then on the 21st of April in the semi-final, Coventry City placed Manchester United in another dramatic game that ended 3-3 after extra time. And there was a highly controversial goal for Manchester United that saved their bacon. And the game, like I say, ended in a 3-3 draw. It then went to a penalty shootout, which Manchester United won, and it meant that they qualified for the final. So that was the Warren's Team Talk Road to Wembley for this season, which means that Manchester United are currently the Warren's Team Talk selection. Now, let me just say, I am not a Manchester United fan, never have been and never will be. I really don't like the club, especially since Ferguson got his grubby little paws on it. I had a lot of respect for them before that, but not since then, I'm afraid. Anyway, so the Manchester United's FA Cup history, they've won the FA Cup on 12 occasions in 1909, 1948, 1963, 1977, 1983, 1985, 1990, 1994, and 1996, 1999, 2004, and 2016. So their first ever FA Cup victory, the first time they won the famous old trophy, was in 1909, a game which was played at Crystal Palace Stadium in London, and not Selhurst Park. I think it's on the venue of the Athletic Stadium in Crystal Palace. And Manchester United won that game by 1-0 against Bristol City. And the goal scorer that day was Sandy Turnbull, and he scored in the 22nd minute. And that was enough for Manchester United to win the trophy. So then what I did then, rather than going through all of those FA Cup victories, I then picked out a couple of other ones. Most notable one for me was the 1977 FA Cup final. I was 10 years old, I suppose, and it was a massive game. Liverpool were going for the treble. They'd already won the league championship. They were in the European Cup final, and on the FA Cup final day, Manchester United stood in their way for the FA Cup, and Liverpool were hot favourites to win the game that day. And Manchester United won the game by 2-1. Stuart Pearson gave Manchester United a shock 1-0 lead in the 51st minute, 6 minutes after half-time. And then just 2 minutes later, Jimmy Case equalised to make it 1-1. And then another 2 minutes later, Jimmy Greenough popped up to make it 2-1. And that's how it stayed. And Manchester United defeated Liverpool, their big rivals, and put pay to any hopes they may have had of a historic treble, because it would have been the first time that any English club had done the treble. So, yeah, it was a massive, massive moment. So, their most recent FA Cup final, FA Cup victory, last time they won the trophy was in 2016 when they defeated Crystal Palace by 2-1, thanks to goals from Juan Mata and Jesse Lingard, and after Crystal Palace's Jason Puncheon had given Palace the lead in the 78th minute. So, like I said, Manchester United have won the FA Cup on 12 occasions. And as we know, as we saw, their first one was against Bristol City, which they won 1-0. The next time they won it was in 1948 when they defeated Blackpool by 4-2. Then in 1963, they won it by defeating Leicester by 3-1. Then the next triumph was in 1977, the match that we just heard about against Liverpool, where they won 2-1. Then in 1983, they played Brighton and HoveAlbion. The first game ended in a 2-2 draw, and there was a famous incident right near the end of the game when a Brighton striker by the name of Smith, Gordon Smith, I think it was clean through and goal, and unfortunately he missed, and that's where the famous line comes from, and Smith, he must score, and he didn't. Anyway, the replay came and Manchester United won that by 4-0. And then 2 years later, United defeated Everton by 1-0 to lift the trophy. Then in 1990, they played Crystal Palace, the famous final where Ian Wright came off the bench to score twice for Palace in a 3-3 draw. The game then went to a replay on, I think, the Wednesday night at Wembley, and United won that game in a dour 1-0 victory. In 1994, Manchester United thumped Chelsea by 4-0 to win the FA Cup that year. 2 years later, United beat Liverpool 1-0. 1999, they defeated Newcastle by 2-0. Then in 2004, they placed Millwall in the FA Cup final, which was, I believe, Millwall's first and only ever appearance in the FA Cup final. Millwall lost that game by 3-0. Then in 2006, Manchester United, then in their most recent FA Cup victory, defeated Crystal Palace by 2-1. So let's have a look at the times they've been runners-up. They've been runners-up on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 occasions by the looks of it. The first one came in 1957. They were runners-up twice in 57 and 58. And let me just find something I want to read here. Just give me a second. So in the 1957 FA Cup final, 6 of the 11 players who took to the field for United in this game died in the Munich air disaster not just 9 months later, as did a further 2 players who did not appear in the game, whilst 2 others who both appeared in the game were injured in the crash to such an extent they were never able to play again. The only United players who appeared in the final a year later were fullback Bill Folkes and forward Bobby Charlton. In 1958, United, who had lost the previous final to Aston Villa, had been decimated 3 months earlier in the Munich air disaster and fielded only 4 crash survivors, along with several newcomers. Just 2 players featured in the United side from the previous year's final. 6 of them were among the dead, along with 2 others who had not played. 2 who were injured to such an extent they could never play again, while another had not yet fully recovered from his injuries. So the fact that they were able to reach an FA Cup final just 3 months after that horrific accident in Munich is just a huge testament to the club and to the players involved. I find it unbelievable that they were able to do that. So fair play to them. Some huge achievement. And then the other times they've been runners-up were in 1976, 79, 1995, 2005, 2007, 2018, and last year against Manchester City. Ironically, who they'll be playing this weekend in this year's cup final. So there's been the two finalists are exactly the same for 2 years running. I don't think that has ever happened before. So their Manchester United's FA Cup records. Their first FA Cup match was against Fleetwood Rangers in the first round on the 30th of October 1886, when Manchester United went under the name of Newton Heath, and the game ended in a 2-2 draw. Their record FA Cup win was 8-0 versus Yeovil Town on the 12th of February 1949. Their record FA Cup defeat was 7-1 against Burnley in the first round on the 13th of February 1901, and 6-0 versus Sheffield Wednesday in the second round on the 20th of February 1904. Manchester United are the only club to appear in a final in every decade since World War II. Dennis Law, who is Manchester United's highest ever FA Cup goal scorer, has scored an incredible 34 FA Cup goals for the Red Devils between 1962 and 1973. Manchester United's lowest moment in the FA Cup came on the 2nd of January 2010, when they lost at home to Leeds United, who were in League One at the time. And at the time, there were 42 places between the two teams when that FA Cup third round tie was played. It was Manchester United's first defeat in the FA Cup third round since they were defeated by Harry Redknapp's Bournemouth side in 1984. And what made it even worse was the historic rivalry between the two clubs, which stems back hundreds of years and has its roots in England's War of the Roses. So Manchester United's leading FA Cup goal scorers, Dennis Law has scored 34 games in 46 appearances. Jack Rowley scored 26 in 42 appearances. Wayne Rooney scored 22 in 40 appearances. George Best has scored 21 in 46 appearances. And Sir Bobby Charlton has scored 19 in 78 appearances. So their complete record in the FA Cup is they've reached 21 finals, won 12 of them. They played 320 games, 197 of them, drawn 68, had 58 losses, and have a goal difference of 320. So this season, let's have a look at their season so far. So this season, this current season that's just ended, they finished in 8th place, having won 18 games, drawn 6 and lost 14, and had a goal difference of -1, which I'm sure they're going to be looking to improve on for next season, because a club of Manchester United stature should not be performing in such a way, in my opinion. So their FA Cup run this season, and the third round they faced Wigan Athletic and won 2-0 away. In the fourth round they went away to Newport County and won by 4-2. In the fifth round they travelled to Nottingham Forest and won 1-0. In the quarter-final they faced Liverpool at home and won that tie by 4-3 after extra time. And then in the semi-final at Wembley, they faced Coventry City and won the game on penalties after the game ended 3-3 after extra time. So Manchester United's leading goal scorers this season are Rasmus Højlund. He scored 16 goals from 35 appearances and 7 substitute appearances. Bruno Fernandes, who scored 15 from 46 starts and 1 substitute appearance. And Scott McTominay, who scored 10 goals from 26 starts and 16 substitute appearances. So the discipline stats for United, they've had 102 yellow cards and 4 straight red cards. And the most yellow cards for the team, 12 have gone to Bruno Fernandes and 9 to Casemiro. And the most red cards, well, there's 4 players who've got 1 red card, and they're Casemiro, Diogo Dalot, Marcus Rashford, and Amad Diallo. Manchester City, let's have a look at their FA Cup history. So they've won the Cup on 7 occasions, in 1904, 1934, 1956, 1969, 2011, 2019 and 2023. So their first ever FA Cup final victory was again at Crystal Palace, just as Manchester United's was, and that was 1904. They defeated Bolton Wanderers by 1-0, and the goal scorer that day was William H. Meredith in the 23rd minute. This is a picture there of the winning Manchester City team with the FA Cup trophy, which, as you will notice, the trophy is slightly different to the one we know of today, and that's because I believe there's been about 3 or 4 different FA Cup trophies during its lifetime. So the next one I picked out was the 1969 FA Cup final at Wembley, where Manchester City defeated Leicester by 1-0, and the goal scorer that day was Neil Young in the 24th minute. And then in the most recent FA Cup final victory was last season when they defeated Manchester United, ironically enough, by 2-1, thanks to 2 goals from Ilkay Gundogan in the 1st and 51st minute, and Bruno Fernandes scored United's goal, a 33rd minute penalty. So, yeah, and I do believe I'm right in saying this is the first time where the final has been contested by the same teams in consecutive seasons. So that would be interesting. So Manchester City's complete record of FA Cup wins: 1904 they beat Bolton Wanderers 1-0. 1934 they beat Portsmouth by 2-1. 1956 they beat Birmingham 3-1. 1969 they defeated Leicester by 1-0. 2011 they beat Stoke 1-0. 2019 they beat Watford 6-0, which was a record equaling scoreline for an FA Cup final. And in 2023 they defeated Manchester United by 2-1. So they've been runners-up in the FA Cup on 5 occasions. In 1926 they lost 1-0 to Bolton Wanderers. 1933 they lost 3-0 to Everton. 1955 they lost 3-1 to Newcastle. In 1981 they lost 3-2 to Tottenham in a replay after the first game ending the 1-1 draw. And then in 2013 they lost in a major upset to Wigan Athletic by 1-0. So their FA Cup records. So the record appearances in the FA Cup goes to Mike Doyle, who has appeared in the final on made 44 appearances for the club in the FA Cup. The record FA Cup goal scorer has been Fred Tilson with 22 goals. Their record FA Cup victory was against Liverpool Stanley on the 4th of October 1890, when City won by 12 goals to nil. And the record FA Cup scoreline was 11-4 v Crystal Palace on the 20th of February 1926. The record FA Cup attendance was 84,569 against Stoke City on the 3rd of March 1934. And a little known fact is that in the 1933 FA Cup final, Manchester City played Everton, and this was the first game in which shirt numbers were worn. And Everton won the game by 3 goals to nil, and they wore numbers 1 to 11, and Manchester City wore numbers 12 to 22. So there you go. Now, in 1956, there was a chap called Bert Trautmann who played in goal for Manchester City, and he was a former German prisoner of war and settled in Manchester, I believe, after the Second World War. And the 1956 final went down in City folklore after the bravery of keeper Bert Trautmann. The Blues beat Birmingham City 3-1 to lift the trophy for a third time, and it was the former German paratrooper who made the headlines. A nasty collision with Birmingham striker Peter Murphy rendered Trautmann unconscious, and in the days before substitutes, he recovered and played out the remainder of the game in considerable pain. And Trautmann pulled off a string of fine saves before it was later revealed he had in fact broken his neck. So, wow, that's pretty wild, isn't it? It really is. Jesus Christ. And well, some of these players carry on these days, honestly. So Manchester City, FA Cup records. The leading FA Cup goal scorer is Fred Tilson. He scored 22 goals. Sergio Aguero has scored 20. Eric Book scored 19. Alec Hurd scored 17. And Tommy Brow has scored 17. So their complete record in the FA Cup, they've reached 12 finals, won 7 of them. They played 377 games, won 197, drawn 70, lost 110, and scored 720 goals and conceded 452. And they've got a goal difference of 268. So on we go. So the season so far for Manchester City, well, as we've seen, Manchester City became champions of the Premier League for the 4th time in succession, the first time that has ever happened. So congratulations to them. And their FA Cup run this season, in the 3rd round, they won 5-0 at home to Huddersfield Town. In the 4th round, they travelled to Tottenham Hotspur and won that game by 1-0. In the 5th round, they travelled to Luton Town and won that game by 6-2. In the quarter-final, they defeated Newcastle United 2-0 at home. And then in the semi-final, they faced Chelsea at Wembley Stadium and won that game by 1-0. So there you go. That's how they reached the final for this coming Saturday. And Manchester City's leading goal scorers this season, Erling Haaland has scored 38 goals from 44 appearances. Phil Foden has scored 27 from 53 appearances. And Julian Alvarez has scored 19 from 52 appearances. So another impressive performance there from Erling Haaland. Manchester City's discipline stats. They've received 72 yellow cards and 2 straight reds. The most yellow cards have gone to Rodri. He's got 10 of them. And Bernardo Silva's got 9. The most red cards, Rodri has got 1. and Manuel Akanji has got 1. So the head-to-head record between the two clubs, Manchester City Manchester City and Manchester United. Now this is all competitions throughout their club's history. Manchester United have won 78 of those encounters. There's been 53 draws, and Manchester City have won 61. Manchester in the FA Cup, the head-to-head record is Manchester United have won 6. There've been no draws, and Manchester City have won 4. And let's have a look at what's happened in the last 10 meetings between the two sides. So this stretches back to the 12th of December 2020, and on that occasion, the game ended in a 0-0 draw, and that was in the Premier League. The next encounter came on the 6th of January 2021, and Manchester City defeated Manchester United 2-0 in the League Cup at Old Trafford. On the 7th of March 2021, Manchester United won 2-0 at the Etihad in the Premier League. On the 6th of November 2021, Manchester United lost 2-0 at home to Old Trafford in the Premier League. On the 6th of March 2022, Manchester City defeated Manchester United by 4-2 in the Premier League. On the 2nd of October, Manchester City defeated Manchester United 6-3, again at home in the Premier League. On the 14th of January, Manchester United won 2-1 at home in the Premier League. And on the 3rd of June last year, Manchester City defeated Manchester United by 2-1 in the FA Cup. On the 29th of October 2023, Manchester United lost 3-0 at home against Manchester City in the Premier League. And on the 3rd of March 2024, this current season that's just finished, Manchester City defeated Manchester United 3-1 again in the Premier League. So you have to go back to January last year for the last time that United defeated Manchester City. So there we are. So in total, that means in the last 10 meetings, Manchester City have won 7 of them, scoring 23 goals. Manchester United have won just 2 of them and scored 11 goals, and there's been 1 drawn match. So let's have a look at previous matchups in the FA Cup. So on the 3rd of October 1981, in the first qualifying round, Manchester City lost 5-1 at home to United. On the 27th of March 1926, in the FA Cup semi-final, Manchester City won by 3-0. On the 29th of January 1955, Manchester City won 2-0. In 1970, in the 4th round, again, Manchester United won by 3-0. Manchester United won the tie by 3-0. On the 10th of January 1987, in the 3rd round, Manchester United won 1-0. On the 18th of February 1996, Manchester United won by 2-1. On the 14th of February 2004, in the FA Cup 5th round, Manchester United again won by 4-2. And then on the 16th of April 2011, in the semi-final, Manchester City won by 1-0. And then on the 8th of January 2012, in the 3rd round, Manchester United won by 3-2. And then on the 3rd of June, that was last season's FA Cup final, Manchester City won by 2-1. So United's last win in the FA Cup against City was on the 8th of January 2012. So there we are. So the betting odds for Saturday's game is Manchester United are 4-1 to win, and Manchester City are 7-1 on. So it looks like the bookmakers are backing heavily Manchester City to lift the trophy for the second year in succession. My prediction for the game is that Manchester City will win. I think it'll be a fairly comfortable victory, but it will be, the scoreline will be slightly closer than the actual game. And I think it will mean City will win by 2-1. It could be more, it could be 3 or 4 to be quite honest, but I'm just going for a 2-1 victory. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks ever so much for watching, and please don't forget to subscribe, and take care, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all again very, very soon.